Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, starting a minute late here. Okay, let me get my screen share up here. And let me see, do we have any pre-submitted questions today? We do have a question. I don't see the submitter here. Go ahead, Vlad, what do you have for us today? What can I help you with?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. All good. Thank you for asking. I would like to ask, I'm trying to create a flow with the truth table included, and I have a list of values.
Okay.
And I'm getting multiple outputs from the truth table, and now I want to divide that list of values into. I want to break it into small pieces and count the highest answer, because the output is based on the number. So you have a do you know
Okay,
what?
I
So
think so. Just see here. So you have a truth table that's returning multiple results, right?
mhm.
And then you want to sort the results of that truth table?
Yeah, I have a, let's say, the first column is a category.
Mm-hmm.
There are 4 categories, and their second column is different kind of products, and based on the,
So you have two types of output data is what you're saying?
yeah.
Okay, so we'll name this thing like category type string. And then this we could name like item code or something,
Mhm.
which we'll say is an integer. Okay.
And I use integer in a truth table. Can you? In
I'm
a,
sorry?
I have external truth table, but you can use the integer over there.
Oh, this is an external truth table?
Mhm.
That's okay. You can't use an integer? Should be able to use. You should be able to use. Is it a decimal that is that is
Yeah, this is the numbug, and
so it's using it's a decimal?
yeah, so it's a decimal.
Oh, okay. That shouldn't affect our thing here. So I'm gonna just make a truth table here. Say string starts with. We'll just say,
A, whatever.
yep. We'll add 2 rows here. And then here we'll put cat 1, 1. We'll do cat 2, 2.
Yeah, but let's say that you have 2 column starts with a H,
Okay.
or actually I have a 3 and 1 to 3, and I will receive from the API the first column in H, and then 2 categories from those 3.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Okay. Uh, Try to change also that that second column to H.
This, okay,
Mhm. And let's pretend that I have
I see.
also three Gs and so on.
Okay. But
And I'm
like, you're gonna get, the question is like, this is, if we run this, right? Like, let's just hard code H,
Mhm,
right? Hard code hello, and then connect this, and that means I can run this, right? And if I look at my output data, I should get three results. Cat 1, 1, cat 2, 2,
mhm.
right? And so you want to, the question is, how do you, you want, you're trying to sort.
This is working perfectly, but I have input variables as a list.
So, so I think you might have, okay, I
Mhm.
think you might have to loop. You're probably going to have to loop this then. Unless we could say list rules in list, but I don't think you can do in list inside of an external truth table.
This is not gonna work.
So you're passing in, you have an input here. This is like a list of, I'll call it list of starting characters, right?
Yeah, list of categories, and there's a list.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you're trying to pass that list into a truth table.
Mhm,
So I think you probably just need to iterate that list. So you would do something like um, this. Oops.
mhm,
And that way, so you could take in your for each step, you'd take your list of starting characters, right? And then for each starting character, you'd pass it into, you'd use item from your for each, pass it into your truth table. And then you would here, you declare like your list type.
mhm,
So we would want to get a defined object for this truth table output. And so here under output, we want to create custom type.
mhm,
And then we would save this and get a code compile. And it'll create it'll create a property, a defined data type for us automatically that has a type category and item code here.
mhm.
We'll see that slightly differently now in the debugger once that code compile occurs. While everyone else is waiting, I see a question here from Dennis. If you have any questions, please put them in QA or chat while I'm answering Vlad's question here. All right, so now if I look at my truth table, I have my truth table 10 output type. It'll come here and I'll call this, I'll just name this output. And I'll search for truth. There's truth, there's my data type. I'll create a list. I'm just creating an empty list here of that type. And I'm going to come to this step. And my original list, I'm going to select output. I'm going to select output. Oh, create data one underscore output is the name. So there's that. That'll switch my type for me. And then new items, I'm going to select the output, the truth table one output here. And then I'm just going to change value on that list every time I hit this. And then now I can support the ability to get to pass in multiple categories. And then every time the truth table returns a result set, it'll add those, it'll add items to that list. You might need to just make sure, you might have to do a check here to see if the list is empty or not. And if
Mhm,
so, avoid hitting the add item to list step. But this, I think, gives you kind of what you're after here.
mhm.
Instead of
Okay.
doing it all in the truth table, you'll just do a little bit of work in the flow that is calling the truth table to split up the results
Mhm,
and to save off the split up the input list and save off the result list.
mhm. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
What's gonna be your output?
Whatever you want here, probably we would come and we'd say create data one output. And if
Mhm,
we were to run this and we say, we'll just say HG, we debug, it'll go through. And if you look here, we should see look, so you can see this, it went through a second time and had no results. And
Mhm.
so it hit our default output for this last result here. So you can imagine this is your G's or I's or whatever the additional category codes might be.
Mhm. I need output as a category 1 and category 2. For example, let's pretend that I will get as I mentioned, I have A, B, C, D categories in the
Mm-hmm.
first, and then I have a 4 options in the second column for each category.
Mm-hmm.
So B1, B2, B3, B4,
Okay.
and I can get 2A, so I can get A1 and A3,
Sure.
and
Okay.
I need to get the higher score from the, and also for the category B, C, D. It is possible to create something like that.
Like, so in our example where we have, you need to find out which of the H's is the highest.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, you could, in this example, in this loop here, before you add an item to list, you've got all, you're dealing with each character at a time or each category code, right?
Mhm.
So you could use like a sort step, sort array. And here, for example, I could pass in, if I go select and I find my truth table output, that should switch the type for me. Doesn't like that. Let me just save and close. That should be fixed. Okay. And then
Mhm.
sorted array here. For field, I'll just do item code. I could do order descending. And then I could take only the first item off of the list that comes out of here to get the top one.
And if I wanna sort, okay, go on. Let's see
Hmm.
what's going.
So if
If
you
I'm
look at
gonna,
input and output data here, this should be reversed.
it
Yeah.
is possible. If I'm gonna have a 2 columns over there, then I can sort it based on 2 columns, right?
Yeah, you just need to get a little bit more complicated than using a default. So then you'd be looking, if you look sort, you can use like a collection sort step.
Mhm.
And this is a special flow that you can run here. We should have documentation about this, but this flow has like the ability to define your sort logic in it, inside of it.
Mhm.
And so you can do that sort logic here. So let's just see really quickly. Do we have good docs about this in our step library? Collection sort step. Oof, what's wrong with this formatting? Collection sort. Uh, this is not detailed enough. Let me but yeah, this step allows you to determine that, like, because if you have multiple properties to sort on, then
Mhm.
using this flow, this custom flow will let you handle that. Yes.
Okay, I'll try to use it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer.
You bet. All right, and then let me go ahead and mute you, and then I'll ask. So Dennis's question here, let me put this in the chat for everyone. Dennis, I just unmuted you if you want to, if you have any questions. We're wondering about unit testing. We're trying to run all the unit tests and they're failing, but when we run one at a time, they are passing. Can you please give a quick overview? Got it. This is something that might not be super intuitive. It has to do with creating, you just need to make sure you have, a unit test can't pass unless there's a rule. So let me create a quick flow here. And I'm going to create a super simple flow here that's going to add number 1 and number 2, both of which will be integers. So here's number 1, here's number 2. I'll set both of their types to int. And then I'll save this. And I'm going to come to my in step here, and I'm going to output. Sorry if you guys can hear the my printer in the background. There's some there. And then I'm going to put an add step here. I'm just going to add these 2 items together. So go to my input mapping editor here, map and map. And then I'm going to pass out the output of that add step to my in step. Okay, So now I've got this fully configured flow. Wonderful. Now let's go and see what the issues you're having are. So if I put in 1 and 1 here and save as a unit test here, I'm going to name this thing test 1. Okay. And then I'm going to add a new test here called test 2. I'm going to do 2 and 2 and save. Now, if I click run all, they'll both fail. And I think this is what you'll, yes, Will, thank you.
Yep.
Please, that document is insufficient. It should talk to you about how to use that subflow, please. But if you run 1, I'm guessing you'll see it looks like the flow actually executes and you're taking this to be success or that it's worked correctly, right?
Exactly.
The issue is you haven't defined a rule at all. So if I click in test 1 here, you'll see this edit unit test 1 rule. The unit test can only pass if its rule has passed and it ignores null rules by default. So here I'm passing in 1 and 2. So I know my result given this super simple flow is going to be 3. Let me edit this. Let me write an assertion rule here in the rule designer. So I'm going to say the outcome path, outcome done sum, that's the property name. This is the format for the property name. It's an output on a path on the end step whose name is done, whose value is sum. That's the output I defined there. I'm gonna click sum and I'm gonna click equals. And then I'm gonna put 3. I know this rule outputs 3. Excuse me. I know that given the inputs of 1 and 2 and my understanding of what this flow does, that I should expect the output of this flow to be 3. What you'll notice is if I run this now, I'll actually get to see my unit test here in the left-hand side, inside of the activities, and I'll be able to see that it has indeed run and set itself to true. And if I do this now, you'll see that the test is passing. So what we do in our upcoming versions, we're going to show this a bit better, where it would be like a null or unable to determine type output. Right now, we just fail we automatically fail a unit test that has no outcome or assertion rule assigned to it.
Makes sense. Now, our company is very fairly new to decisions. So we wrote our first, I was here last week too. We wrote our first flow and everything. Now we are just unit testing.
Okay.
What are your recommendations as far as how should we go about if you were to build unit tests and define unit testing that runs like, I was watching your videos and you can schedule unit tests to run daily or weekly or whatever that is, right? So what are your recommendations? How would you go about, like for this, how would you go about setting up your unit test?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing would obviously you want to get them to be fully configured so that they have their assertion rules. You'd want to make sure you have enough. You want to have the right number, the right coverage, and that coverage is based on, at minimum like the number of paths in a flow. Every time you add like a rule step, of course you get like true and false paths. And then what we see, so you can come. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I mean, I know what unit tests, right? I'm a developer by trade, so I know what unit tests are. We have created like at least 7 or 8 right now, unit tests, right? We have to add those rules, yes. But now I saw another option when you go to unit test, if you go to debug, right? There's another thing where I can also provide data to it, right? So
you talking about from flow here?
Yeah. So like I can, like my unit tests, I have 3, like I'm validating name, I'm validating phone number, and I'm validating email, right?
Okay.
In my at my work, right? So I know what to test. So I can give those as an input. So I can only create 1 unit test and, like make a truth table out of it per se. Is that something that you recommend, or would you recommend like writing tests for like individually, like you did? So right now you have 1, 2, right, and 2, 2, and the expected result is 3 and 4, right? I can put that in the table and just run the whole table as a unit test per se. Is that an option available per se, or no?
I'm not sure I follow exactly the point here.
So we have created 2 unit tests, right here.
Okay. Yes, correct.
Right, the first one adds 1, 1 and 2, and expected result is 3.
Correct.
Right, the second one is again taking the same data set, we're adding 2 and 2, and expected result is 4.
Correct.
Right, so can I put that into a table and then run the unit test so that it will take all the inputs from the table, right? I don't know if that's possible or not.
You can, I mean, you can, using this like from flow option here. So in test 1, we could create from flow, and then this gives us the option to use this data source configuration flow. If we edit this flow, it's going to be on the end step, it'll automatically fill in the values in the unit test itself. So if I wanted to say fetch from a database or run, load an Excel file, for us, you probably wouldn't use a truth table itself, as that's doing some kind of logic. It's not really like a place to just define data to return.
Okay.
I mean, you could use it for that, but that would be a non-standard way to use that.
Got you.
And so you could fetch from a database here. The reason we added this is some things have to do with, they're always like, it would be get cases created in the last 7 days. And in the static editor, because the way you select times, that becomes difficult to have it always be 7 days in the past, where you select like a date time stamp. So we added that. So the genesis of this feature was the ability to better support some of those time series elements.
I see.
Where, but you could define like an Excel file and have them all, and then have them not. It wouldn't. The difficulty here is this is for each unit test itself. So it can't run multiple. Now, yeah. So I don't think there's a good way to like create a table and say run through each use cells 1 and cell 2 across as many rows as I give you for the values for your inputs today.
Okay, so that sounds awesome. So let's get off this subject and go back to what you were showing me.
Sure.
About unit testing.
Well, remind me where we left off at here.
Okay, so you were showing me like, so we have this 2 unit tests, and then you were, I think, showing me somewhere about unit testing.
Yeah, you can run. I think your question is like, how should you schedule the running of these? And you can of course run these whenever you want. Inside of each flow, you'll see. Inside of each flow, you'll be able to run the result that you were running them for that specific flow, which you can see here. You can also come to this unit test results tab on any designer folder, and you can run everything inside of the current folder or for current folders and subfolders. So you can imagine this is like my project folder here, and I can see I could run all of them for a particular project. You can also just set up scheduled jobs inside of our job scheduler. You could build a simple flow to run all the unit tests. You can do that here in scheduled jobs. You could build a scheduled job. Also, you could just run them across the whole thing. I think it's system designers, unit test management. And here you can run by a specific or run by a particular project. And then you can see all unit tests inside of this folder here as well. I think those are all your options. There's no requirement that you run them manually. You can use scheduled jobs in some of our internal service steps to do those. If I were to come back and look at a flow here, you have to dig into the toolbox just a little bit, but if I come to integration and I come to internal services, and I scroll down to unit test service here, then I can, execute unit tests for folder or for flow or for rule.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then I could have the scheduled job, I could have the scheduled job run and
So
do these things.
cool. During training, they were talking about like, I mean, we had exercise to do, and then once we were done with our exercise, we had to run kind of a validator checking,
Okay.
making sure everything was correct. Are you aware of? So basically, it was running unit tests in.
Yeah, you talk about the self-paced online project, the thing that you build a flow and test it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
or it was that we had actually on-site training.
Okay.
And they built a dashboard and on our where we modified the flowchart, and then we would go and run the unit tests to make sure the flowchart executes the way it's supposed to, or something
Sure.
like that.
Right. Yep.
Is that something different, or?
Yeah, that's like a custom project in Decisions we built to try to just I mean, you could like there that's just, I mean, that's a custom project we built that does use unit tests and some sort of trickery in the back end to do some checking. What about that are you wanting to do it like on save?
No, I was
Or
just wondering if that's something that you guys practice, right? Like we are looking for like kind of a pattern that you guys follow into how would you set up unit testing, right? Because whatever I do today, it might become kind of everybody will start doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the company. So I don't want to basically put a bad practice in place, so that yeah, I don't want to put a bad practice in place, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we would put unit tests on any, of course, any flow that has an output. Avoid putting unit tests on flows that have assigned forms in them. Usually, like that's not a good, you don't get a whole lot of data out of that. If you as you want to make sure you have, as you might move some logic into subflows, you'd want to put unit tests on those subflows as well, not just root level flows. And then just have some sort of internal policies in terms of when you execute them. We've been having some customers ask us about enforcing, unit tests passing or unit test inclusion prior to check-in. That's something we don't really, that's not something we have today. Something we're looking to add in the future. The really hard question is like the unit test coverage itself, right? And that's not something specific to us, which is how do I know that I've got enough coverage given the complexity or the business criticality of this particular flow or this particular project. A lot of customers just run them nightly, treat them like a compile type event where they get the results of these unit tests in the morning. You can also, that's probably, I think that's probably the answer there, is just like a recurring test run. Now our service team has a project that they use to do auditing, and that's where it reports and does like a health score based on unit test inclusion. So more easily calls out what flows have or don't have unit tests in a project. Since the expectation is that anything that gets built has a test framework put around it. Yeah.
So my coworker Keith, he's also online. If you want to unmute him,
oh yeah,
he
sure,
can.
Sure.
If he has any other follow-up questions for
Yeah,
you.
there goes. He could.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So the tests that we have like 5 or 6 tests, right, Dennis?
Yeah.
And when we run them, they will, following what you instructed, they will pass individually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I think you might have, yeah, so the reason that they're not passing when you run them all is just because you don't have any rules associated with them yet. You need to define rules for them to pass. So if we come back to unit test 1 here, I'm not sure what point you might have joined the call, but we needed to define the evaluation rule or the assertion rule. And once you have that, these will pass if assuming that they get the correct, that rule gets the correct data.
I can also validate JSON, right? As part of that.
Sure. Yeah. Now that might probably get a little, so are you guys using us as like a headless service? Like you're receiving data and sending response back on the end step?
Yeah. Yes.
Then, yeah, so you can look at so you don't, in that world, you don't actually, the workflow, like in this example, like we could configure this to be an API service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that means that we could call this and get JSON back.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just get this here. So if I were to call this, like, and it'll give me JSON back, right? With the sum.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually want to look at JSON because if I look at this flow on the end step, I don't care. The workflow doesn't actually know the data return itself. If you look in this, you'll see, excuse me, if you look here, you'll actually see we're specifying it in one of the URL parameters or in the post body respective to the type of call we're making. But you could look at an object. So like, for example, if I said, let's just use an account, right? If I said I was passing out an object called an account, right? And then in my rule, I'm going to break all these rules now, just as a note. Sorry, if I come in here back to debug and looked at test 2 here, right? I could look at, I'll have outcome done, and then I could look at a property inside that. So you're not looking at, the point I'm trying to make here is you don't actually look at the JSON, you are passing out objects.
Oh, okay. I see.
You can check the property of the object here, but the actual the URL, the construction of the call determines the format that gets sent back.
Yeah, because we have like we have 3 rules that branches off of the response. I mean, of the input, and then it goes into whatever those 3 rules execute for name, phone number, and email, and then it will pass out if the name is valid or phone number is valid or email is, or one or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
Okay, I think we have an idea here.
The other thing to talk about here that might be relevant, especially if you're making like database or API calls, is this idea of simulation. And if you click on a step and scroll down to testing and simulation, there's a series of properties you can select for simulation. And you can have it run, if you run it in debugger, which is actually running the flow itself, in unit tests, which is where we started with this, right? Clicking run all, or whenever the flow runs itself. And then you can specify the path if there's multiple, or you can also have a flow run if you want the path itself to be dynamic in some way. So you can use this simulation behavior to sort of get a slightly more sophisticated execution. If you want, like, for example, you might not want, let's say that there's a database save step in one of your flows, right? You don't want to update the database when the test runs, right? In which case you could find the database step and you could say, whenever I run this in unit tests, I want you to always output a certain value. This is an add step, so it's gonna let me hard code this. Or I want you to bypass this step, not actually run. So you'll see it gives you this S for simulation. Now you know that there's some kind of simulation being applied to this step.
I see. Okay. So you can simulate without making some of the calls.
Right, exactly. Or maybe there's an API call you want to avoid. But so simulation behavior allows you to have the step behave in a particular way in a particular scenario.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for walking through all this.
You bet. Happy to help. Excellent. All right. What other questions does anybody have today?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
My name's Will.
Will, thanks, Will.
Yeah, you bet, Dennis. Happy to help. Yeah, I usually run these Mondays and Tuesdays. So
Oh, okay.
whatever help you need, please let me know.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to take off.
Sure thing. Yeah. All right. We're at 12:38. Anybody else have any other questions for us? No, I think we'll go ahead and call it an afternoon. Looks like everyone is rolling out, so I think that's a good enough answer for me. All right, thanks everyone. And looks like Jared is here tomorrow and Andrew is here on Thursday.
Okay,
All right.
bye.
Did you have another question, Vlad?
No, just bye.
Oh, yeah. Okay, you bet. Have a great day. See ya.